Nags Board of Commissioners, please come to order. Do we have a motion for adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Not all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Open the floor for public comments at this time.
You can have.
Go for it. Eddie. If there's any honeydews you want done soon, tell us about them. It's the public.
Okay, we're in the public comment session right now. If there are any items you'd like to bring to the board that won't be discussed later, just we can do so at this time. Hold your comments to 5 minutes, please. If not, I declare public comments closed. First item on the agenda is discussion of the upset bid process for the Peak Resources Rehabilitation Center. Cliff, could you update us on that process, please?
Yes, sir. At your November 2nd Commissioners meeting, you adopted a resolution authorizing the upset bid process to begin for the Peak Resources site. Peak Resources made an offer to the town to purchase the site. That offer to purchase was noticed in the Sunday, November 6, 2016 Postland Times, and it spelled out that pertaining to the general statute, the course of action to take for advertising this notice for purchase. The 10-day upset bid process began, and it is now, that process is now ended, and there were no bids received to match this bid. So at this time, you're in a position to be able to act to accept the proposal as presented by Peak Resources or not. And I can go through some of those provisions at this time, or I can wait until.
It might be good to remind the board of the provisions that we had in there, please.
Just for a little bit of background, I realize everyone in this room understands how we got to this point, but I think it probably is worth bearing to mention for those that are watching or may watch later. The idea of a nursing home in the town of Nags was something that began back in May of 1975, and the process was discussed and considered about the need for a nursing home on the Outer Banks. The board at that time, being extremely visionary, worked towards that as a goal. In October of 1981, after some back and forth between the property and ownership of a nonprofit that was appointed by the Board of Commissioners, the bonds were issued by Dare Health Development Services for $3.1 million to Outer Banks Haven for acquisition, construction, and equipping of a nursing home. Documents contain language that provides that upon the final payment of the bonds, title to the facility immediately passes to the town of Nags. There was, so at that time, from what I understand, interest rates were extremely high because the town did have that vision that originated back in 1975. The town let the bonds, government financing, and once those bonds were paid off, title reverted back to the town. And that occurred as planned and as should have in October of 2011. And that's when this board really remembers very well the process that you engaged at that time. That you had a 30-year-old building. You entered into a lease with the present tenant at that time and struggled to get that tenant to make some very needed capital improvements. That went on for many years to the point where eventually it became evident that we weren't going to get the improvements to the facility that the facility needed and that the patients and residents of the Outer Banks and beyond deserved to have. So at that time, you were able to transfer a lease to Peak Resources. Peak assumed the lease before that, there was some special legislation that allowed you to lease the property for initial 10-year term and then two 15-year terms. That lease is still in place, and Peak has, at this point, is making some improvements. It's made some substantial improvements. You all have worked very diligently with Peak to make sure that it's clear that any offer that you accept for purchase must require and must ensure that in perpetuity there remain a nursing home on the Outer Banks. And Peak has made you an offer that includes $2,609,591 worth of capital improvements to the site. I believe the mayor and I met there today with the advisory committee, and I believe that it'll be in excess of that amount. They have also agreed that in the event that they were now or in the future were to no longer operate this site, the site would revert back to the town for that assurance that at that time you would re-enter a similar process to find someone to operate the facility. So that is a condition set forth in this agreement. Even if they were to build a facility located somewhere else on the Outer Banks, the facility would revert back to the town. So I say that because I think it's important for the public to understand that this is a facility that the town has not invested taxpayer money in. And this is a facility that the town is not giving away. You're ensuring that a facility remain open and operational. And Peak is committed to doing that. They're committed to putting in the resources. And if we find ourselves 30 years from now that things change, obviously, and we find that we need someone else, and we'll be able to do that if Peak were to leave for whatever reason. With the money they have invested in this site, I don't see that. I don't have that as a concern. So again, the condition is that they will payment to the town in the amount of $4,000. Buyers shall complete the capital improvements to the property in an amount not less than $2,609,591. If they were to sell the facility to someone else or transfer this to someone else, the same conditions would apply to the new owner. They would be assuming this same agreement. So again, that's, I think, Mayor, I've hit the...
Yeah, I think so. I think that's hit the high points of the agreement that we have talked about and the agreement that was in the bid process. Does anybody have any questions or at this time? Yes, Marvin?
I think, just for general clarification, Cliff, you mentioned a couple of times about location of the facility on the Outer Banks, specifically on the islands of the Outer Banks or including Dare County, or what area exactly is spelled out with Peak?
Northern Outer Banks?
Dare County.
Dare County.
Dare County.
So
The whole idea was to keep a first-class nursing home in Dare County.
Thank
For
you.
Dare County residents. Any other questions, any discussion? Do we have a motion?
I would make a motion that we take action to move forward with this sale to Peak Resources.
I'll second that.
Motion's been made and seconded, and that motion should be a motion to accept the offer submitted by Peak Resources as set forth in the written offer dated October 7th, 2016. Is that the motion?
Yes, sir.
That's the second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion? Not all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Thank you very much. We did meet with Peak today, and we will continue, the nursing home committee will continue to meet with them to ensure that these modifications still go forward. We did change their construction sequence a little bit today, that where it would make more sense to isolate wings 3 and 4 and go ahead and finish the rest of the building first before moving down to that end. So they'll have new dining facilities and a new rehab gym, and then halls 100, 200, and 500 will be completed. So the 2/3 of the nursing home will be completed, and before they start working on the last 2 halls. But,
And a new oven?
Hmm?
And a new oven?
They are going to rework the kitchen.
Good, thank you.
So a new oven
That's
with,
good. That's important.
with all elements working. Under new business, we have consideration of a resolution calling for improved health care for veterans. Commissioner Ratzenberger, do you have anything that you would like to update us on that? That was a resolution that's approved by the county board for the
All I know about
Veterans
this,
Advisory Committee.
all I know is that
What'd you
it
see
came
there?
out of the Veterans Advisory Committee. Chairman Woodard read it off in his comments at the board meeting this month, and here it is. So I could speculate on background, but
Okay, I thought you might have some additional background, but
no.
you've read the resolution calling for the improved health care for veterans. Do we have a motion on that resolution?
I'll make one for discussion.
Is there a second to the motion?
A second.
Motion been made and seconded. Any discussion?
I just have a comment about the wording. In the very last paragraph, it talks about correct the appalling conditions that exist within blah, blah, blah. I'm not sure what those appalling conditions are. I do know that there are severe issues with providing the services to veterans in a timely manner. I just wonder if there might be a better way to word that rather than talk about appalling conditions, because I don't know what they are.
Your suggestion is just to drop the word appalling?
That would be one way to do it,
I
or,
would agree with
Yeah.
that.
And there would be measures to correct the conditions that exist within the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs.
Would you accept that friendly amendment?
Don't look at me, I didn't write this thing.
No, but I know, you made a motion, so I'm just asking, would
Okay.
you accept that friendly amendment?
Yeah, run it by me again.
Just to delete-
Something's not working right in
yeah,
here tonight.
the very last paragraph,
Delete the word appalling.
under the therefore be it resolved, the third line down, the word appalling is in there, modifying conditions. And
Yes.
the recommendation is that we just drop the word appalling.
I love that.
All right. Any-
There's some other in the previous paragraph that is similar. I mean, value judgments. We all know what we read, but and as far as I'm concerned, in the second whereas, there's a technical wording issue. And it says care for honorably discharged veterans. An honorable discharge is a specific thing. And in fact, the Veterans Affairs gives benefits to veterans other than dishonorable, which is a class of 3 difference. You've been through this with the, so the wording of that is not even quite accurate up there. But it may not be enough to worry about.
Okay, the motion on the floor as amended would be to adopt the resolution and delete the word appalling in the last paragraph.
Can I amend my own motion?
Yeah.
Next to the last whereas, since Marvin led off with an appalling, I'd like to match that with the next to last sentence, where the care being provided to veterans.
Where are you now?
I'm at the next to the last whereas, the last line.
Okay, care that being provided to eligible veterans.
Yeah, I'd like to delete continues to be of poor quality and just replace that with the word is.
Is below the standard of care that our veterans rightly deserve.
Right.
Okay. So second to that amendment.
I'll second that also.
Discussion on the amendment. Not all in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign, and so ordered. We had a friendly amendment deleting the word appalling in the last paragraph. Yeah.
I'm lost at amendments now.
Right, and then you took away continues to be of poor quality and below, or excuse me, and
There I am, right.
eligible veterans is below.
It's below the standard.
You deleted 6 words and added 1.
All in favor of the motion as adopting the resolution as amended, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, like. There being none, it's so ordered. Mr. Leiter, do you need a closed session to update us on the Richardson case tonight?
I do have just one minor thing to brief you on that. I think you have another closed
We have
session as well, so we can just
request for closed
combine
session that comes right after that to consider the acquisition of
we
real
could do them at
property.
the same time. That would be fine.
Let's go ahead and, okay, we got one, excuse me. I skipped over.
Before we get to that, though, I also have one other item for open session.
I've got one more item before you come up. I skipped.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This is consideration of a resolution exempting the design and construction of Bonnet Street Bathhouse, Town Hall Planning Office enclosure and Dowdy Park projects from the Mini Brooks Acts. And Andy, you're gonna come present that for us?
Yeah, well, you've seen these before for several other town projects we've worked on that were fairly small. Essentially, North Carolina general statutes includes a chapter referred to as the Mini Brooks Act, which determines the selection process for professional service such as architects, engineers, and planners. It basically states that you have to go through a selection process, and it can't be a cost-based selection process. It has to be qualifications-based selection. However, there is something in the act that allows us to exempt ourselves from the Mini Brooks Act for projects that the design fees will be less than $50,000. And we've identified several projects that are in this year's budget. The Bonnet Street Bathhouse, which we've already basically started the design for that. The improvements to the planning department, which would be a fairly small design fee for that project. And then also the Dowdy Park Phase 2. And in that situation, we would like to continue with the same group of designers that we've been using for the previous phase. So these are all 3 projects that we think we would like to exempt from the Mini Brooks Act for various reasons, but we would just ask the board to consider allowing us to do this so we can move forward with these projects as quickly as possible and not get hung up in that qualifications process that's really not necessary for these 3 projects.
Any questions for Andy?
Motion to adopt the resolution as,
We have
sorry.
one question over there, Commissioner Ratzenberger.
In all the whereases, this is 50,000 for each project, correct?
Yeah, yes, for each project, the design fee has to be less than $50,000, anticipated design fee.
That's not immediately obvious in the 50,000s as to what that means.
Right, because these are 3 completely unrelated projects.
I understand that. I wasn't, but, okay, thank you.
We have a motion.
Motion to adopt the resolution as presented.
Second.
Second motion made, second discussion on the motion. If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign.
Thank you.
So ordered. Thank you. Now, the next, you have one item, Mr. Lighty, for the
Yeah.
open session?
Yeah, for open session, I just wanted to make sure the board was aware that the Supreme Court of North Carolina has scheduled the oral arguments in the Nags case for December the 14th at 9:30 a.m. This is a public proceeding. No one is required to attend that other than the lawyers, but the public, of course, is entitled to attend if they would like to, and so that will be held at the Supreme Court building on that date, December 14 at 9:30 a.m. Also, at this time, the court has only scheduled arguments for the appellants, which are the Nags, and the appellees, which is the town of Emerald Isle. No time has been given to any of the amicus or amici, to be proper, who have filed briefs in support of one position or the other. So it's likely that this will just be a 1 hour oral argument.
Okay, thank you.
Smile when you say that.
Amici.
Do we have a motion to move into closed session now for the next two items? The attorney discussing the Richardson case and a request for closed session to consider acquisition of real property.
Was that a motion?
Motion move into closed session under 143-318-11A3 and A5.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded.
And
Any
the prop-
discussion?
And the property is at 3115 South Old Nags Head Woods Road. Okay.
Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. There being none, we'll be back momentarily. Closed session, please.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. The board did discuss the Richardson litigation with the town attorney. The town also, the board also discussed matters within the attorney-client privilege and discussed the potential acquisition of the property located at 3115 South Old Nags Head Woods Road, but no actions were taken.
Next item is consideration of a revised definition of demotion as in Article 4 of the pay plan of the town of Nags Head. Mr. Ogburn, would you like to cover that, please?
Yes, sir. I'm requesting that the board consider approving a change to a demotion policy to reword this policy. It's found in Article 4 of the pay plan, Section 7, pay rates and promotion, demotions, transfer, and reclassification of the town's personnel policy. The way the policy presently reads, there's quite a bit of ambiguity in this. I don't believe that the intent would be for an employee who voluntarily seeks a demotion to be able to keep their same rate of pay. The way it presently reads is an employee who's demoted shall have the salary remain the same if the demotion is voluntary, provided that the salary does not exceed the maximum for the class. If the demotion is for cause, the employee's salary will be reduced to any step in the lower salary range, as long as the reduced salary does not fall within the minimum salary rate of that range. I've tried to figure out what the intent was. The only thing that I can figure that might make sense is that if the town was in need to reduce a position, I would go to the supervisors and say, I need someone to take a demotion. In doing so, you can keep your salary as an incentive. But to make that request and to keep the salary, I don't believe that was the intent. The way it's worded now is, it's on your screen, you have it in front of you, is that the employee who is demoted voluntarily will be offered a salary that is associated with the salary grade of that position. So it's a little bit clear that it's not a shall, that there's some discretion based on the town manager and the department head's recommendation to keep things equitable. And I just think this is a little bit more clear as to the intent. Hopefully that.
Any questions for Mr. Ogden?
I have
Yes,
a
Marvin?
question. I see that there's different words associated with voluntarily and involuntarily, or other words is for cause. But it seems like you, as the town manager, are going to do the same thing either way. You're going to
Yes.
pay them
Yes.
for whatever the position is.
Whatever the value of that position that they're
Yeah,
returning to, or
yeah. So I guess I was just asking is why we treat it differently as voluntarily and for cause when you're really doing the same thing. So could we just simplify it and put one simple statement in there that if someone is demoted, then you're going to do such and such, whether it's voluntary or not? Because it was just a little confusing to me when you break it out separately. Okay, I'm trying to figure out the difference. And when I analyze it, I couldn't find any difference. It looked like you're going to do the same thing.
If I may comment on that, there is a distinction between the two, and I think in the voluntary demotion situation, I think the guiding principle for the manager is to provide a salary grade for that position that is internally equitable with the department. So I think that requires a consideration of what other people are making because someone has accepted or requested and voluntarily received a demotion. And so in that situation, the idea is that the salary they receive should be equitable compared to other people within the department. But when it's an involuntary demotion, the manager gets to set a salary grade that he finds to be consistent with the position and the employee's experience, which does not have any, may not have any relationship to what other people in the department are making, maybe lower. So I think that's why I think that's the distinction between those two scenarios and why there's different language used.
Okay. I hear what you're saying. It's hard for me to figure out how it would be different. For example, if it's for cause, does it mean that the town manager could do something that is not internally equitable?
That's correct.
Such as what would that mean?
Such as move the employee who had several years of experience in that position previously back to the very first step in that grade of the salary. So in other words, I'm demoting you and I'm assigning you back to the very starting salary for the position in that. Instead of terminating you, that's what I'm going to do. Whereas if someone comes and voluntarily asks to be demoted, if the manager agrees to that, then he's going to set a salary for that person that's going to be consistent with or equitable compared to what other people in the department are making. So that's why that's how it's different. So yes, I think the idea is that the manager has the flexibility to put somebody in a position when it's an involuntary demotion that would result in a lower salary than that person would have received had they voluntarily requested and been given a demotion. I know it doesn't say that, but it's because there's flexibility built in for either mechanism.
Flexibility
but that's,
built in there.
and you're right, it may not be the clearest language, but that is the way I envision it operating.
Any other questions?
I kind of asked this in email, but, I mean, I understand involuntary, we got that. But if we restructure, the board comes back and knocks out 5 slots or 3 slots from the towns, we gotta. And so we go up to Fred, say, Fred, your job is gone. The only thing I can offer you is a demotion or something elsewhere. And I don't know if this is even covered elsewhere, but it came up to my mind. But we can keep you at the pay grade, at the grade you were, because this is not your fault. You're absolutely squeezed out. This is not I didn't ask for, nobody asked for a demotion, it's not for cause. It's an exterior influence. Was that kind of the intention, the original? Or how do we handle that anywhere different from this? That's really, was that a voluntary or an involuntary demotion of that individual? If he takes the job, he's got a choice. He's going to lose a job or he takes a demotion. Which one is that?
I think you're right. I think that's what the intention was, because I think there's there's different types of demotions. There's an involuntary demotion, which is done as a disciplinary action. That's referred to here as a demotion for cause.
Correct.
Then there's a voluntary demotion, which is, I don't like this job that I've been promoted to, I want to go back to where I was. That's not for cause,
Right.
and that's voluntary. I think the idea of there being a demotion as part of a restructuring or reduction in force,
Reduction in force.
it's really not a voluntary one. I mean, I think that's involuntary, and I think the idea is that you might hold someone harmless, but I think that's what was intended by the original policy language here, that that would be considered voluntary. In other words, I'll accept that, I'll go ahead and let you do it. You don't have cause, but you're eliminating my position, and so you can move me to this position, but my salary will stay the same. I think that's what the intent, that's the only thing I can figure would have made
Yeah,
sense.
that's what, when I read it, that's what I thought was
That's the
going
only
on.
thing that makes sense. in my mind. That's the only thing that I could
Yeah,
fathom.
so are we covered for the three options then? Is this little rewrite, we really have the three options we've talked about, involuntary for cause, voluntary by request, and involuntary by
Reduction in force.
RIF, you know, that kind of thing. So have we covered these folks with this one, or is it covered elsewhere in the manual? I don't know.
No, I don't think there's any other place in the manual that would cover it, but I do think that the first one here would cover both of those two scenarios, as long as they're not with cause. So a voluntary demotion that I request and a demotion that I accept that's not for disciplinary purposes, I think that's still a voluntary demotion.
Okay, you think they both fall?
I think
the
that
same?
allows him to treat those two scenarios the same way.
I'm the guy that likes to have 1A, 1B, and then 2, you know, but that's okay. If we're comfortable.
You
fine.
forgot the bow legs.
I- Following up on that, if you have a reduction in force, chances are it's because you're in a budget crisis and you have to reduce your expenses. It does not seem logical to me that you would delete a position and give somebody else, the position you're deleting, but say, but you can work in this job and I'm still gonna give you the same pay because you've accomplished nothing at that point.
There's an alternative to that. I mean, I agree with what you say, but let's just say, for example, we only need half the police department. Times have changed. Everybody's little angels, and I mean, everything's wonderful. And so we only need half the police department. So what do you do with those guys? And say, well, look what we can do, but man, the number of trash, I hate this analogy, don't take it out on me, but we got more trash to pick up. I can offer you a position over here. I mean, it may not be a complete reduction of some, and those are terrible examples, erase the tape. But it may be by department or something that could leave, you know, an excess in one side and a shortfall in the other.
No, usually, in reduction of force, people would be going out of the bottom and come off the payroll, so that, I think that would take care of your problem. That's where you get the reductions, people coming off the payroll altogether.
Right.
But I kind of feel like maybe we ought to send this back one more time and let's specifically spell out item 3.
Well, my
What do you
question
think?
there would be, and not knowing the condition, would you take RIF an employee that's making $75,000 and pay him $75,000 for a $40,000 job?
I wouldn't.
No.
That's why it doesn't seem
I didn't
logical
say
to
I
me.
would, I was saying what the condition, you know,
It would defeat the purpose of the RIF.
Right.
You
So
can
I
always
think-
take them in a
I think it's worded
position.
correctly, because you would put them in the position, in that grade position, maybe you put them at the top, but I don't know that you go through that process and want to pay someone the same salary to do.
No, I'm not saying doing that. All I was saying is that would be a third classification for a demotion, and maybe we ought to spell out, even though it would be handled the same as a voluntary demotion, but spell it out as such, so there is no question on it.
Like, John, is RIF not Seems that would be a different,
It's not
a reduction in force would be a whole different,
I think it should be, but I don't think you have a policy on what happens with compensation during a reduction in force.
I'm not sure you can, because you may not offer any, if it was a reduction in force, you may not offer any other opportunities. If
Right.
you reduce
It
the
may
force, you
just be
reduce the
gone.
force. So I'm not sure you need a definition for it if you're gonna do a RIF. I'm not sure.
the
that-
problem with some of the policies and the way they word them, if you get that tight with shall, then your hands are tied.
Yeah.
I think the original wording that you had is not good wording, that we should reduce somebody and give them the same salary that they had before, but I'm not comfortable with the wording that we have here. I think it's a little bit ambiguous and unclear, so I kind of agree that another look at it, we may come up with a better policy.
I'm okay with it.
Well, we can tweak it.
So,
I think it's fine.
Any further discussion? Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to adopt the changes to this policy under Bolegs B, demotion. So,
I'll second.
Motion made and second. Discussion on the motion.
And as part of that, if the manager wants to bring something else forward, I would encourage him to do that.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, I'm willing to adopt this as presented.
Yeah, I can live with what's here, it's just raised a question in my mind, and if the manager and the person, and the HR director review this and find that it's, or find out that it needs even more look in terms of a RIF
Or if there needs to be another
Another-
paragraph.
or something, that's
Separate.
fine.
But
Come
that-
back
To
later.
me, that would almost
Maybe
be a separate section.
paragraph. Any further discussion on the motion? If
Thank you.
not,
Yeah, I guess I agree with the intent of it, but I really can't support the wording that's there because I think it's too misleading. And rather than say, well, if the town manager wants to come back with something else, then we could do that. I'd rather say, let's just wait a couple of weeks and have him come back with something else. And I don't think we'll have anything lost in that short period of time. That's the way I feel about it.
any further discussion? All in favor of the motion accepting the definition of, for the motion of personnel as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Like sign, carries 4-1. And I think with that, I think the recommendation was that the town manager and personnel director look at the possibility of reduction in force and see if anything else might need to be done. Is that our consensus?
with our attorney review.
With our attorney reviews, right?
HR director and I have been talking about a comprehensive look at the personnel policy as a whole, and we'd like to be, and we'll do that, and we are doing that, and we'll bring, some changes at once.
All right,
And we'll include a look at
that'd be
how we
good.
handle the reduction in force.
That'd be a good time to do it, yeah. Okay, thank you. Board of Commissioners agenda, does any of our commissioners have anything they'd like to bring to the board tonight? Commissioner Ratzenberger?
I attended a village sewer plant conference, Veterans Day, on behalf of the town. Normally Todd is there and Todd Kraft is there and Cliff, but the odor studies have been completed, and although somewhat lengthy and everything, they have excluded hydrogen sulfide as the source of the odor problem. Extensive testing, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, off-site from the plant. which leads open to a raft of other little chemical reactions that could be a problem. And as I understand it, this is not my line of work, all those other ones take almost individual treatments that are site-specific. So Utilities, Inc., Carolina Water, has pretty much accepted the fact that we need to cover the basins, or they need to cover the basins. And that was the gist of their report to the POA. And the village POAs discussed that and the possible financial implications on us folks that are over there. And so what they're looking at, and this hasn't been completely, I mean, they have the engineering proposal, and I've got the whole thing here, to cover 2 basins, put in a splitter and a screen and a gizmo that makes things smell better at that point. Plus do some work on the dumpster where they have to, when they do the, move the sludge out,
Sludge out, right?
they need to do some work there to buffer that area during the sludge transfer process, which led to the parenthetical point that they do it every couple weeks, about 50,000 gallons every couple weeks during the summer, but never during the winter. So it tells you, and there were some comments made about the stuff that's in there, and also some commercial comments about commercial people stripping their floors and running all that in there, killing the bacteria and all that. But anyway, it's an uphill battle, to say the least. Anyway, they're looking at, if it goes through the Utilities, Inc. process, they're looking at possibly having it completed by this summer. And the bulk of the work, this is the upfront work, recommendation 2 is to cover 4 basins. But the bulk of the work will be done to cover 2, so the last 2 would be lesser. We discussed the fact that, of course, this will go back before the Utilities Commission, the Rate Commission, that kind of thing. And how that's handled, because that, of course, the village, of course, expressed the, we don't want to be lumped in with everybody, but you know how the rate things go. Utilities, Inc. will go back for a rate increase throughout a general area that will cover different situations and specifics, and we thought we did pretty good the last time the rate commission met, and we went, and all of us went up, Cliff and Todd and I and a couple others went up and testified, and we ended up pretty good. So anyway, just to let you know that, but I think the key out of it is not all the technical side. There's been some delays in the report and the analysis and that kind of thing, but it's very encouraging to see that Utilities, Inc. understands there is an odor problem there, and they've followed a process step by step to arrive at the point of saying, yeah, we really got to do that. And it's encouraging.
Took a long time.
It did take a long time, but I think, the whole problem with the bin thing is that in this corrosive area here and all, you end up with what's up the banks a ways, bins falling, roofs collapsing, that kind of stuff. So that was the least preferable, not a preferable solution if they can solve it other ways. And we've hung little mirror deodorizers out of trees and every other darn thing in an effort to solve the problem. But so anyway, I got that, and I just bring it up. It was encouraging, and I just kind of stay on it. And Todd Kraft is deeply involved in it. I attended, along with Mayor Pro Tem and David Ryan, the North Carolina BWA, Beach and Inlet Waterway Association meeting. And the one thing I wanted to just brief you on, the beach and inlet management plan dictated by the legislature to be accomplished is complete, minus 2 appendices which haven't been delivered yet. So only 2 of the 3 appendices from external agencies. The study work has been done. One of the appendices showed where's property ownership. And I think it's very interesting. It's just something we should recognize. If you start at the bottom of the state of North Carolina kind of goes like this. You start at the bottom of the state and you plot where properties are owned. At the bottom of the state, the heavy line of who owns what properties heads out through the center of the state this way. You get up past to the top 3 properties, or top 3, Hyde, Dare, and us. That line makes an immediate shift northward,
Straight north.
which says, possibly to the legislature, that there aren't that many North Carolinians impacted by the northern 3 counties for the properties. I mean, it's a very distinct shift of property ownership in there. Something we need to be concerned. The bigger concern, and Mayor Pro Tem and I have talked about this, is the apparent solutions, and we'll have to see what comes out of it, all appear to be focused on the 8 ocean coastal counties. Somehow, this was supposed to be a funding, what's the impact, what do we fund? It appears to be pointed at U8 coastal counties, even though they'll talk on one side about the statewide impact of everything.
Tourism and everything.
The minute you suggest that any of the 92 others who are getting all of our money from us be treated equally, or we be treated, in this kind of impact, whoa. So that's going to be very, and I'm sure Mayor Pro Tem has her comments, but we maybe not. But it's going to be interesting what we see from the final there, and then what kind of things the legislature may want to adopt, and whether or not we've been better off without this study. My comments.
The study is about the economic benefits of, shoreline management and deep draft dredging and shallow draft dredging, and all of that occurs along the coast. And every study they commissioned only looks at the 8 counties for a funding source. But at the same time, they do talk about, all of the benefits of, the center of the state, how we all reap those benefits. So spending money there is good for all of us. It just doesn't seem to work. It doesn't flow the other way. So if it's truly beneficial, if all the ports and the waterways and the beach is truly beneficial for everyone, as we know it is, because we send a significant portion of tax dollars that way, it seems like we should be treated equally. But like John said, we'll have to wait and see. They're looking at multiple scenarios. I don't know if they'll do a combination. I think what they've commissioned might be difficult because they're looking at 4 different taxing scenarios. So that's at least 4 fights.
Right.
So, as opposed to perhaps one solution. So
The one-
it'd be
yeah.
interesting.
The one other thing I mentioned, I talked to the study folks out there, because between the session, whatever you call the sensing session that we went to this summer sometime, I forget when we went, here to provide input to review of the plan to start with. And now, there's been a major change in the shipping industry, with Hanjin going under, and it's given a lot of shippers cause to step back and say, whoa, where are we going with these big ships full of this and that and the rest of it? And I think there's a consolidation in the shipping industry, because they've overbuilt. as if that sounds like rental homes here, don't. But anyway, they've overbuilt, and they're gonna retrench. So, and I made the point to them, I said, you know, that you probably should, footnote that to the legislature when they start thinking about deep draft, as to how deep a draft do you really need? Are you competing where you were at the beginning of the summer, or are you competing now after the Han Jin episode and the aftermath of that thing? So, I don't know.
Well, and Wilmington just got approved for a major upgrade
Yeah,
other than their basin to take the biggest ships in the world.
right. But
But
I
don't see
understand
Wilmington
that, but.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I don't see that Wilmington's gonna be more competitive than Norfolk or Baltimore or Charleston.
Well, from being on the other end of that and have done studies on it in a prior life, Wilmington is not a favorite port,
No.
favorite port
It's not.
because the internal infrastructure doesn't support it like it does the other sites like Norfolk, Baltimore, New York. So that's where the infrastructure, the interior infrastructure to support the ports. are
Well, we got
located.
plenty of briefings on the connector, and that's the thing I've talked about with the ports here, and 17. And on the way down to it, we got the drive over improved pieces of 17 and back as they're working at it. So, I mean, you can see that, but you're absolutely correct.
It's not.
Railroad.
Compared to Norfolk.
Sex.
Yeah.
Don't
Right.
have you don't have the railroads and you don't have the other infrastructure
Yep.
there.
And it's not encouraging that the folks down around Kinston, I guess, said they didn't want that big plant down there, that big,
Global Transport.
the global transport.
It's been a boondoggle from day one.
Yeah, so,
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Ratzenberg.
Okay.
Anything else, any other commissioners like to bring anything tonight? Okay, I don't have anything to bring to the board tonight either. How about other business? Anything else we need to talk about tonight? If not, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second?
Moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
I,